Hi everyone, this is Panos from the community team at Hack the Box, and today we're going to do a cloud workshop on one of the cloud challenges from last year. First, we are going to go over some basic concepts of AWS, and then we are going to do a small workshop on an easy challenge from last year. So without losing any more time, let's begin. So the first concept that we're going to take a look in is the AWS key ID and secret access key. So both of them are not the same as a traditional username and password, but you can think of them as such in an AWS environment. The access key ID is the unique identifier and it's very similar to a username. It is used to identify the specific AWS account or IAM user that is making a request. The secret access key is a secret credential and it's similar to a password. And it is used to authenticate and authorize the request made by the access key ID, by the account. Both of them are used to sign API requests to AWS services, thus allowing application and scripts to interact with the AWS resources. After that, we have the AWS command line interface or the AWS CLI. So what this is a tool that allows you to interact with AWS services through the command line. It enables you to manage AWS services, automate various tasks from your terminal, the command prompt, and it's making it a convenient way to perform operations like launching instances, managing the S3 buckets and more, without having to use the AWS management console. So if you want to play the CTF, you should probably install it. You can find it on the Amazon website, and along with it you should find a lot of other information. There is very good documentation on the Amazon website and probably other sources as well to help you install it and help you with the syntax of every command. Now, since I mentioned the S3 buckets and I do not have them in the slides, let's go over them really quickly. So S3, it's SSS, which stands for Simple Storage Service, and they are used to store and organize data. Each backend can hold an unlimited number of objects, and that objects could be files or metadata, and it is quite scalable since it's a cloud solution, and it's quite a secure storage for a variety of use cases. These use cases include backups, content distribution, archiving data, and stuff like that. Also, the buckets can also have configurable access controls and policies to manage the permissions related to them and the security. Moving on, we have the identity and access management. This is more usually called IAM from the initials. It also seems like IAM, which is a nice acronym. And what this is a service to manage who can access the AWS environment. They do so based on permissions. What these permissions are is JSON files, and they are called policies. So all these policies can be assigned to users, group, or roles. So what is the difference between those three is that users are individual accounts for people or applications that need to access an AWS resources. Group, it's easy to imagine, it's a group, or the group is a collection of users, a group of users, making it easier to manage permission to a large number of people for multiple users at the same time. Roles are assigned to AWS resources, are specific to AWS resources, thus enabling them to access other AWS resources without using long-term credentials. And roles can provide temporary security credentials. And it also handles both the authentication and the authorization. So in case you do not know the difference, authentication verifies the identity of the user, so who you are, and is the identity of the users and the applications through unique credentials like passwords or in this case the access keys. On the other hand, authorization determines what an authorized user or application is allowed to do based on the policies that were assigned to them. So the main benefits of the AAM are that it specifies the exact actions allowed for specific resources. So you can give whatever specific permissions you want. You can use it to provide temporary access to certain AWS resources, which is useful when only certain access is needed. But despite not being the case of this workshop, this can be vulnerable to injection attacks. So right now we are going to move into the workshop. The cloud instances look very similar to full PON machines, the boxes, if you are familiar with the Hack the Box platform. So you only get the IP of the challenge and you have to download the VPN to connect to. So let's go on to the workshop. I have already run Nmap to save us some time, and we can see two ports running. The SSH port on port 22 and the web server running on port 80. So we try to browse into the URL and try to see if anything interesting pops up. Since nothing is working, we can try to inspect the code or the source code of the web page to see if anything interesting is there. So if we go through it, at the bottom we can see that it tries to load the script from a URL. The problem is that our browser cannot resolve that URL, so we will probably have to add it in our host file. We do not know the IP of this URL, but let's make an educated guess that that it shares the same IP as the server. So let's edit our host files. So I have already added it from a previous run at this challenge, but I have commented out, so the syntax is pretty known at this point. So now we can try to access that file. So as we try to access, we get a server error when we try. So let's try to see the request to see if it provides us with any more info. So I'm just going to use the developer tools for this instead of a proxy. I will just go to the network tab and reload. And as if it was not already obvious by the name already, we can see from this header that this URL is an S3 bucket. So we can start interacting with it by using the AWS CLI. So if this is your first time using it, you will probably need to configure it. You can use whatever as an access key and a secret key since you don't have anything, but you have to be careful to add a valid region name and a valid output format. These are just some examples. You can try to Google and find whatever valid and try to work with those. So for this we need to specify the endpoint. And we can try to list the contents of the bucket. So we see that we can find two directories, and we can try to look into this folder. So let's start with the first one. So use the same command as before, but we just add the bucket name that we want at the end, like so. And we see that it has two files inside. So the first is the index that we already saw, and the other one is a file called main.tf. So I have explained yet what the TF file is, I will do afterwards, but it's a Terraform file. So we can try to access it, to download it and see what it has. So for this, we are going to sync the folder and download everything in our current path. So we use kind of the same command, but instead of ls, we use sync. And we need a destination for it to download it. We can just put the dot so it can download it in the working directory. So if we do an ls, we can see that we have downloaded both files. So let's try and have a look at the main file to see if we find anything interesting. Let's go over it. So we are not that lucky because the keys are redacted in this version, but we can find some other keys. First of all, we can see that for the bucket and void backups, the versioning is true. So that means we can access previous versions of that bucket and of the files in that bucket, and that could be very interesting. Other than that, we can see that it creates another bucket called website assets, and it creates an IAM user for it. The user's ID starts with an 683 something, and that user can read, list and write in that bucket. So this is something to keep in mind. But right now we don't have access there, so we should try to list the previous version of the bucket that we have access to. So for this, we're going to use the S3 API, and we want to list the object versions, and we need to specify the name of the bucket as an argument this time. I have probably did the typo at some point. Backups, not buckets. I'm still writing buckets. Okay. After the same typo 2 times, this is all the different versions that we can find. We hit Q to exit. So the oldest version is this one. So we can try to start and going one by one to see what is interesting, but we will start by the latest one, the oldest one I should say. So we will still going to use the S3 API, but this time we're gonna get the object. And to know which objects, we need to specify the version ID. So we will just copy this. We need to specify the key, which is main TF. Once again, I'm copying from here. And we need to specify the bucket once more. Let's see if I write it correct this time. And let's name it odd.tf. So if we do an ls, we see that we have downloaded it. So let's try to have a look at this one. And in the oldest version, the access key and the secret key are there. We have to see if they are valid. So I just need a place to copy right now. So let's try to configure our AWS once more to include these. So let's copy the access keys. And we leave the rest the same. So this time, let's try to list the other bucket. The name for it was website assets. I think, yes, that was. So if we see the files that are there, there seems to be an image file, the background, and the index of the page. And this does not help us, but if you remember from the TF file, this user can also put objects. So we can try to upload something. So we can try to upload the PHP file, a website, to see if it works. Let's try to do that. So for this we're going to use the argument cp. I have already a very simple PHP shell. I can show it to you. Just this, very simple. So I will try to upload this, and it also needs the bucket location. So we use this syntax once more. So it seems that it was uploaded successfully. So we can try to access it. We can see that we get a response. It's not a 404. So we can also try to give an argument to see if we have command execution, and we do. So right now we can use this cell to run whatever command we want on the system. And you can just search around and try and find the flag. So one of the things that was not previously mentioned is the TF file that we discovered. So these are files associated with the Terraform software, which is an open source infrastructure as code tool. And with it you can use a simple declarative language to configure and manage your infrastructure. Also, you can automate the setup and management of various cloud resources across multiple providers. So what are these files? They are used to write a configuration for Terraform. They define resources, data sources, and a lot of other things. And they are used to define and manage infrastructure through code, as said in the beginning. So it's time for some key takeaways from this challenge. So if you are a red teamer or just somebody that wants to play the cloud challenges in the CTF, just keep in mind that cloud challenges can't be thought of as web challenges. You have to do some research first on the technology to know the concepts. You have to enumerate all the things. There are often forgotten files that carry information, and this is especially true for versioning system. Versioning can be used to your advantage. If it is not properly configured, keys forgotten in code, it's quite often. And last, for all the blue teamers and sysadmins watching this, the key takeaways are to always implement strict access control and IAM policies. Configure your access control list and policies for the S3 buckets. Make sure that the buckets are not publicly accessible unless absolutely necessary. If it is possible, rotating AWS keys, it's always a nice practice. And when using versioning system, make sure to review them regularly and purge all their versions, and that is especially true if they contain any sensitive information, which probably they shouldn't in the first place. So that was everything. I hope that you learned a thing or two, and I wish you the best of luck in tomorrow's CTF. Bye guys.